Welcome to the Living Quadratus podcast and welcome to our table. This is episode 6. And as for each of our episodes, we've got 2 wishes for our time together. First, let's make this a free and safe space, a table of true friendship for all of us, regardless of any identity or category. So whoever you are, whatever it is that is present for you today, you're welcome here. Second, we're here to explore the everyday practices of Quadratus, our name for the universal pattern that lives in everything. We're looking to discover how, for Christians, Quadratus is at the very core of Jesus' teachings.
And I'm Alexander John Shaya. I am on the coast of Spain. And truly, we are spanning the globe today. And we have joining us our guest, Lance Canter from Dallas. And we'll introduce Lance in just a minute. But I, along with Brian, want to say thank you for choosing to be here. And thank you for joining us at what we hope is a real, true table of friendship. Braun, would you lead us in a moment of centering and grounding?
Yeah, sure. So before I do, I'm coming to you from the east coast of New South Wales, Australia, and I'm on Awabakal land and very proud to be able to say that I am living on Awabakal land, the unceded land of the Awabakal people. So as Alexander John strikes the gong, I'll start leading us in a meditation, a brief meditation. So I'm mindful that many of you may be listening to this podcast while you're driving or walking or doing some other activity where it's just not safe to actually stop and close your eyes. So I'm inviting you to modify and adjust this pause to accommodate your circumstances. So wherever you are and whatever you're doing, take the time just to pause in this moment. And if you're able, allow your eyes to close softly. Otherwise, join me in taking this journey inwards. And in your own time, take 3 deep breaths, inhaling slowly through your nose, filling your belly first and then your chest, and exhale completely, releasing any tension that you've carried into this space. With each breath, feel yourself arriving more fully here. Now, allow your awareness to go to the natural rhythm of the breath as it flows in and out of your body without trying to change it. Just allow it to be however it is today. Observing the gentle rise and fall of your chest, the cooling air that's entering through your nostrils, perhaps the warm air as you exhale. take a moment to feel your heart. What's it yearning for? Can you be present to this yearning as it flows through you, remaining and open to whatever arises? In a moment, Alexander John will strike the gong, which is your invitation to effortlessly come back into this space together.
Thank you, Bron. A very special welcome to Lance Canter joining us from Dallas, Texas. And I had the pleasure of meeting Lance last October when I was speaking at a conference at White's Chapel. And hearing about his journey and the work that he's doing now, it's like, Lance, I am so delighted, excited to have you with us to tell us a bit about your background and then in a bit also about your work and how Quadratus has become a way to deepen in your work. So welcome.
Sure. Thank you for having me. So, a little bit about me. Uh, I would say that my spiritual journey began. So, I was raised by atheist parents. So, growing up, I really had zero conception of what God was or what it even meant to believe in God. I had all of these really ego-driven ideas. And I think I came to the conclusion later, a little bit later in life, that uh, I wanted to be God. You know, if some other God existed, then I couldn't be it. And that really manifested itself, I think, in my early 20s. In my early 20s, I began working as a paramedic. And working as a paramedic in the city of Fort Worth, I was kind of making life and death decisions, uh, which kind of reinforced my Lance God sort of idea. You know, uh, The thing I would say that I took away most from my time as being a paramedic would be the concept of medicine.
Mm.
Medicine became such a central focus for me during that time, as well as being kind to other people. I learned the importance of bedside manner. I probably was a bit more judgmental in my life prior to that point, but I learned this one thing that despite all the differences people may have, how they look, what their background is, what their creed, religion is, everybody is unified through sickness. I remember I remember also in my time being a paramedic is I used to hold a lot of my members, my partners in the ambulance hostage.
Mm.
Now I'd have a lot of theological arguments about them because I was so adamantly militaristic in my atheism. And man, I sometimes I would just make the ambulance so tension filled, and I was just always trying to plead my case and I was trying to argue my point. So those are things I remember the most about my early 20s. Then my disease had caught up with me. I'm an alcoholic. I'm also a drug addict, recovering drug addict. My drugs of choice were methamphetamine, cocaine, and alcohol. And I got a DWI, which made it so that I couldn't be a paramedic anymore.
Ooh.
And once I left that job, I returned home, and my mother had passed away. She had left me a lot of money, a lot of life insurance money, and I proceeded to blow through all of that life insurance money in the matter of weeks. And that's really what kicked my addiction off. I was in my addiction for about 5 years. Uh, my addiction was, I would say that it ended very poorly. It ended with me drinking creek water, It ended with me eating out of dumpsters at times. It ended with me hearing voices that were shouting for hours on end. It was a very painful time in my life, but I think it was beneficial and I think it was needed because you weren't going to convince me of anything else in life if it weren't going to be so painful. My brother-in-law had been trying to get me to come to a place called the Men of Nehemiah that was in Dallas, Texas, for the longest time. He'd been trying to get me to come for like a year or two, if that. And, I was stubborn, I was obstinate, I was defiant, and I was like, they're going to have to smoke me out of this house, even though the house I was living in was condemned. And there was no electricity in it. I still wanted to have my way. But finally, one day, my brother-in-law came, and I was in a very low moment. And I remember he asked me this question, and he said, "Lance, what are you gonna do? What are you doing, man?" And I was all out of clever things to say. So I was like, "All right, man, I guess let's go try that rehab that you've been trying to get me to go to for the past couple of years." And on the drive there, I remember he was saying this. He said, "You're gonna finish this thing, right?" And I remember thinking, how hard could this be? Because you have these ideas of what a rehab will be like. You're going to get some shiatsu acupuncture, and then maybe have a personal masseuse. I don't know. And I get there, and it's a completely different sort of culture. So the Men of Nehemiah is a three-pronged approach at attacking addiction. There's a military component, there's a biblical component, and there's a clinical component. And me being an atheist, I remember showing up and looking at the walls in the intake area, and there was writings about God everywhere. And I remember thinking, where am I? This is the worst possible thing that could happen. But I had been promising the entire ride there that I would give it a go. Uh, what first I would say was a very inconsistent notion of God. I remember one of the first scriptures that I ever read was where it says, "Where two or three gather, there I will be in the midst. Where two or three gather in my name, there I will be in the midst." And I remember I asked the instructor, I raised my hand, and I was like, "Okay, man, so what you're saying is like God is a thing that you can overdose from, because if there's two or three everywhere, so it's like, is this omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent being enough for me to overdose on?" Because that's what my God was. My God was drugs. That's the only thing that I had to compare it to. But after some work, I connected with the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous at first. And then little by little, they give me a little bit of biblical, and they gave me some 12 steps. They gave me some biblical. They gave me some 12 steps. And it all came together, I think, in a perfect little amalgamation of my own spiritual journey, my own spiritual experience. I think that my time at the Men of Nehemiah was so profound that I knew, even when I was in the program, that I wanted to go there and work after I had graduated. So after I graduated, I waited 2 years, which is the state law in Texas. You have to wait 2 years after you graduated, at which time I started going to school. I started taking classes to become an LCDC. And when the time was right, I applied and I made my move to go work at the Men of Nehemiah, where I've been working now for about the past 3 years. I would say that the hardest thing that I ever had to do was to be a client at the Men of Nehemiah until I came to work at the Men of Nehemiah. Man, it's a completely different creature whenever you're stepping on into the helper role. As a client, you're just facing your own issues. But as a helper, and you're taking on not only your own issues, but others as well.
Would you just say a little bit about the choice of the name Nehemiah and how that relates to the work of the center?
Sure. So the Men of Nehemiah, it is based upon the book of Nehemiah, the Old Testament story of the cupbearer, who was I believe, Persian or Babylonian cupbearer to the emperor, and he wanted to go and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem that had been destroyed. I think that led to the second exile, I believe is what it was.
Right.
And Nehemiah was granted permission to go and rebuild these walls of protection. So I think what it is the nation or the city would have felt exposed. And I think that's exactly what happens with the man when they come in. We have a biblical principle that says we believe that every man must survey his life and see that the walls of protection for his life have been destroyed.
Mm.
So I think that what we try to do in our three-pronged approach is to build in a lot of these protective factors that may not have existed there or may have existed, but can be expounded upon so that, they, as you would say, find their own Jerusalem.
Wow. So you applied and began to work there.
Yes, I did. I did. It was a trial by fire at first, because I was leaning heavily, I would say, on my own understanding. I wasn't seeking a lot of outside help, but over time, I learned to refine my own approach and not to be somebody that I'm not. I've learned to trust my own who God has designed Lance to be.
Mm. Lance, how did it feel for you as you became a helper, and a worker in that place? How was it for you watching other people make their journey was through the process? How did that feel for you and your desire for them, knowing how difficult it was for you?
You see, and here's where me, I'm I'm an all or nothing sort of guy. So whenever I do something, I do it to the maximum. Even the big book Alcoholics Anonymous would say that we are extreme people. You know, and so for me, I try to carry over the same intensity. And I'm like, man, don't you see? You got to take this serious.
Mm.
And it caused a lot of issues, I'd say, with my own codependence. Um,
Mm.
Basing my results on the results of the client. It was very difficult for me to separate their recovery from my own.
Mm.
But the beauty of it is, I think, is working here, working at the Men of Nehemiah, I get to not only experience my own recovery, which I think is beyond a beautiful experience, but then I get to experience theirs.
Mm.
And I've had to learn how to let guys make mistakes, and a lot of the oftentimes, our program is based upon 3, 6, and 9 months, and for the first 3 months, they're kind of like toddlers. Like they stick very close to us. They ask a lot of questions. Like they want to be close to the parents or the helpers.
Mm.
In phase two, they learn to get a little bit more distant. They're kind of like adolescents. And then in phase three, this is where we let them out into the world for the final 3 months, and they go to work, and then they become like teenagers. And I am over third phase, which are the teenagers. So sometimes, we get a little bit of that teenage flare up of emotion, but I think it's all a part of the process. So I've had to learn how to manage myself so I can help manage them.
So tell us, where along the way did you discover the work of Quadratus? How did that happen?
So I discovered Quadratus when I had been trying to find a way to bridge the gap, I would say, in a metaphorical sense or an imagistic sense, uh, between the Bible and the 12 steps, as well as trying to make the 12 steps a little bit more easy to read or a little bit easier to digest.
Mm.
And I thought that maybe through some of the narratives, like in Exodus, the leaving from slavery to wilderness to promised land, using some of the biblical imagery, that I could find a way to make the 12 steps maybe not so boring. I wouldn't say boring, but make it easy to palate. And in trying to find my way in that, I began to read a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell, and it was
Wow.
incredible. It was an incredible read. It expanded my mind with even how I would interpret scripture, and then I started to see scripture as deeply metaphorical. And then I came in one day, and my spiritual director, Melinda Russ, she had said to me, she said, "I have a book for you." And I said, "Oh, really?" And it was your book, Heart and Mind. And I tore into that thing, and it amazed me. I realized how little that I actually knew. I didn't I because I had been teaching the Bible, but I don't think that I fully comprehended how it was gathered and the audiences that it was written to. It didn't even occur to me that the Apostle Paul was writing all of his letters way before the Gospels were even written. That was mind blowing for me. And then, to see what the psychological undertone of what was going on in each of these cities, to why these gospels were composed in the first place for a specific reason, it really changed the way that I view scripture. It gave me a different framework for viewing. It's incredible.
So I'm going to ask us to pause for just a moment, and I'm going to point you, all of you listening and watching down below, to the links that we have. We're recording this in the middle of March. We are very close to the celebration of Easter. And I want to invite everyone to the online Easter event that Quadratus is leading. It is based on this ancient way of understanding the four paths. And please click on the link and you'll get all the information. And also down below is a link to our website, www.quadratus.org, which is what we're talking about here. And these four paths that are everywhere, and they really are the core of the Bible and the core of Jesus's message. All right. Lance, tell us what you've discovered about the 12 steps and the four paths.
Sure. So in my assessment of the men, because I work very closely with the 12 steps and the Bible, I'm beginning to see, and it kind of blew my mind one day because I was walking down by the lake, and I'd been trying to find, I think I was trying to mix and match with this Joseph Campbell stuff, and then I came across your literature, and it blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, the steps are exactly the fourfold path. And I had discovered that steps 1, 2, and 3 are the first path. I've discovered that steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are the second path. And the third path is steps 10 and 11. And that the fourth path is step 12.
Wow.
And I think they fit nicely and beautifully in everything that a man could hope to achieve in his recovery journey. And I like to focus on journey. It even says this in the big book. It says that we claim spiritual progress over spiritual perfection. And I love that because progress focuses on the journey, which is never going to end. And perfection, while it may exist in the divine realm, it's very hard for me to be able to attain it. If I think that I can, I'm focused on results, and I'm never going to get there. So I think I'm also beginning to discover that I can tell where a man is based upon what steps he's working and what part of the path he is in. For example, I had a client just the other day, and I was reading it was in the book of Matthew. Another element of what I do is I've been teaching the book of Matthew to our new men. And the new men, I think it's a beautiful gospel for new men because it's how do we face change? And I was talking about the second sea crossing where, Jesus walks on water, and how this relates, I think, to the 12 steps is it's stepping out into the unknown. It's stepping out into the chaos. And in the big book, it would say something to the effect of, it's the fear prayer. We have God direct us to what he would have us be despite this fear. And be always has an action. And that is usually to step out into the unknown place, step out into the chaos, to find something solid where there shouldn't be solid. Shouldn't be solid stepping out. Peter stepping out into the Sea of Galilee. But that's what he discovers, with Jesus's help. And I was talking about this as it pertains to fear and taking a chance at life. And this client, he had said to me, he's like, Captain Lance, you're always telling us about the metaphor, but do you think it actually happened? And I remember thinking, oh my God, that's such a second path thing to say. It's the same because he can't hold that tension. He's having a problem with the tension. And it's the same sort of tension that compelled the gospel writers to write the two alternative endings at the book of Mark, which you talk about in your book, because they read it and they just weren't comfortable with it. And it's that same sort of attention, I think. And come to find out, he's still working on his fourth and fifth step. So I think it's bearing fruit with me being able to tell where a man is at spiritually. That's for sure.
And we have had a conversation in the past, and I really look forward to a time, Lance, when you and I will just talk the 12 steps and the four paths. But
Mhm.
what so convicts me is Bill W. and the group that developed this. I don't think that they understood that the four gospels are the same journey, but transformation comes from the source.
Right.
And the same source, wisdom source that gave us the beautiful 12 steps is in a larger way also the teaching that Jesus gives us in the four paths, the four gospels. And it excites me to know that these gospels are so true, just in the same way that the 12 steps are so true.
Yeah,
They work.
that's
And
right.
what I keep saying to people, they work.
Mhm.
And our early Christian ancestors knew that they worked. They knew that this was the presence of Jesus the Christ.
Mhm.
And and they weren't caught up in their heads trying to figure out where Jesus stood and what was the exact word he said on that street corner, because they knew the truth of the journey.
Yeah.
So it excites me so much to hear you also coming to this same place.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I remember you saying that to me in one of our earlier meetings. You had said, Lance, they were both mined from the same source, talking about the big book and the Bible. And I have been hanging on that truth because a lot of the time I see in 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 my clients, sometimes a man will come in with a deeply religious background and they will look at the big book and they'll look at the 12 steps and they won't want any part of it. But if you hang on that truth that they're mined from the same source, then you could begin to see, the similarities, and I think we can even see some of the similarities, like with the woman who bled for many years. She was so desperate, and that's the key phrase. Even in the big book, it says you must have the desperation of a drowning man.
Mm, mm,
And she was so desperate for change because she wasn't able to live her fully functional life. She was essentially an outcast, and she would have been, wouldn't have had a husband. She wouldn't have had a family. She'd have been lonely. And she thought if I could just touch the fringe, of him, I would be healed. And
Right.
after touching the fringe, this is my favorite part, and this is the mind from the same source moment. Jesus stops and he says, "Whoa, somebody just touched me." You know, it's the power. The I think in the Greek is dunamis. The power had left him, and it's not. It wasn't the fact that he said, "Well, hold on, lady, do you understand me right? You know, I want you to go and I want you to go to seminary school, come back, and when you do, then I'll do something for you." No, it was the desperation and the knowledge that he can do it, I
Yeah,
think.
Lance, what you remind me of is back in the 70s, well, way back in those ancient days, I worked in a Catholic parish in the bayous of Louisiana. And we had a phrase out in the bayous, and I won't tell you exactly how that phrase was. It may be a little too rough for this conversation, but essentially it was when you're up to your rump in gator, you can't remember that you came to drain the swamp.
Yeah.
And these four gospels were not written by philosophers.
Mm.
Each one of these communities were at a point not unlike the place that we are right now. They were hurting. Their world was hurting. And they wanted something that worked.
Yeah.
They wanted a story which had the grace and the power to transform their everyday life. And our scholars are wonderful, but they've kind of lost the plot in the sense that they've added this level of intellectualization, so much so that we've forgotten that this is really a journey of transformation. And it's a journey you can trust and use, and it works.
I think that's right. You know, I do a lot of independent study. I'm one of my Clifton strengths is input, which means I'm like a storehouse of information. And so I do a lot of independent research, especially about the Gospels. I love the Gospels now because of Quadratus. And I came across a study that was saying that Jesus could have been an apocalyptic preacher, you know, and using this lens, I remember reading in the book of Matthew, and I'm like, oh man, that could make sense, you know, but it even that is argued by another scholar.
Mm.
So I think that you're right that this that if we focus on the journey, that there is no gray, and it's all Jesus when we focus on the journey, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, I've got a doctorate. I love intellectualization. But when it comes to this story and these four texts, they get me in the gut. And when I feel lost and don't know what the next step is, I at least know where to turn.
Can I just take us on a bit of a tangent because yeah, now that you've mentioned the Clifton strengths, Lance, you've just opened up this filing cabinet in my head because I've done my Clifton strengths as well, and my number one strength is connection. And so I'm in my brain, trying to make all of these connections with everything that you've said, and you've both used a lot, some American stories which I don't really understand, but that's okay because I get the gist, and that's good. I've got the connection there. But what I'm fascinated in is you were raised in an atheist home, and so you worked in as a paramedic, and everybody knew you as someone who didn't really have a faith. And then you go into the Nehemiah program, and you find your faith and you find a strength, whether it's the 12 steps, the Bible. How has your life now, with this new input that you've had, this complete transformation that you've had. How has that connected with your life before you went into the Men of Nehemiah program? And how do you still have friends and connections that don't know all of this new material and input that you've received? And what's that like?
That is a fantastic question. There were a few people that I had to make amends to. I tried my best, I think, to reach out to some via social media. Uh, but for the most part, once I got clean, I kind of closed that chapter in my life. I had a very close core group of friends growing up. We were all friends since, 4 years old, 5 years old. Uh, Two of them that I know of have passed away from an overdose, and then another one is probably in prison. So I haven't really reached out to anybody from my old life. I kind of decided, what's the use? And I've decided to embrace fully 100% this new life that I have. Now, I still speak to my sister, I speak to my brother-in-law and my nephew, my family members. But I would say that once this new chapter began, there is no looking back. That's how desperate I am, even still. I'm not
Yeah.
even willing to risk temptation even in the slightest.
Yeah. I have a family member who has also gone through the 12 steps. And he says that it's just today. We've just got today because there's no guarantee that tomorrow he's not going to pick up. And even though he's very committed to to not picking up, it's like, what does he say? It's like um, 1,000 drinks is not enough. One is
One
too
is
many.
too many, and 1,000 is never enough. Yes.
Yeah, and so I think it's yeah. I'm just interested in what you said, because I think you do need to, like, there is a tension there that I want to influence maybe
Hmm.
other people who haven't received this message, but then their journey is their journey, and now it's moving forward for you and protecting you from what could be if you don't have that discipline, because that's one of the things of the Men of Nehemiah program, isn't it? Is that discipline.
That's right. And Ron, it's not like it's too incredibly hard.
Mm.
One of the promises of the 12 steps is it's the ninth step promise, actually. And the ninth step is the end of the second path in the 12 steps, which puts you into the third path, which
Mm.
is John's garden. And I think the Alexander John would say, how do we receive joy? And I say that for the 12 steps, it's probably more, how do I maintain serenity is what it is. And the promise, the ninth step promise that places me squarely into the next phase, it says that we will know a new freedom, and we will know a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor will we wish to shut the door on it. And it's funny because that promise, alcohol used to do that for me. I'd have a couple drinks, or I'd have a couple lines of Coke, and I would know a new freedom, and I'd know a new happiness.
Yeah.
But the steps, and the promise of the steps is that this obsession to use will be lifted out of your mind. And I can't explain it. It's a truly miraculous thing that has happened for me in my life. Um, but yeah, that is the reality that I live in. And then once you have that lifted, you're in the garden, and then you have to maintain that serenity. And a part of maintaining that serenity is saying no to some and saying yes to others who may need help. Even the big book says that. It says that we focus on those who are ready, because we try not to waste too much time on somebody who isn't, because may spoil an opportunity for someone who is. So that's why I'm very thankful for what I do for a living, because that is my group to pour into. My program has about the capacity for 65 men. So that's what the focus, my main focus has been on.
So, Lance, as we're beginning to wind down here, but would you just tell all of us step 10 and step 11? And then I'm going to relate that to the celebration of Easter.
Step 10 is we continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, we promptly admit it. 11 is that we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out.
And what's so beautiful about that in the language of the 12 steps, that was the reason that Christianity created the celebration of Easter. For 500 years, Easter was not, I'm going to tell you how Jesus died. Easter was deep remembrance of the fact that we pray for to know the will and the energy or the grace to carry it out. And we had this moment every springtime to bring us back to that reality, because that's the reality that oftentimes in our daily lives with the rest of the journey we forget. And we needed this time once a year to, it's almost like going back to boot camp. It's like step 10 and 11 boot camp. But because without that, the journey can easily begin to drift off. And it's why that in the original Easter of Christianity, they didn't use Matthew, Mark, or Luke. They only used the Gospel of John. They only used this gospel of praying that we too would know the will and have the grace to carry it out. Because if you know that gospel, you know that in that gospel, there is no prayer that the cup be passed. In fact, in that gospel, Jesus says, "Give me the cup. I've come for this cup. Give it to me now." And it's that deep, deep, deep practice at Easter that we come to know that that's our prayer too. That we do not pray that the cup be passed, but we pray that the appropriate cup be given and that we have the grace and the will to carry it out. And that's the original Easter. And again, I would love if anybody who's listening to this, please come join us for the online Easter, which is we're going to meet 4 times, an hour and a half at a time, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, right before Easter Sunday. And would just love to have you come and be with us and celebrate this power that's in us to keep us on the journey of transformation. So I don't want to put you on the spot, Lance or Braun. I don't know if anything you would like to add as we come to a close here, but I am so grateful, Lance, that you've joined us today. And we're definitely going to have you back, and we're going to talk about the material of the 12 steps and the material of the 4 paths and open that up with even more detail.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I love Quadratos. It has been life-changing for me. The first path about the temple and the temple destruction that happened in 70 AD. It has been so monumentally important, I think, in explaining the Gospel of Matthew to our new men who have come in, because the temple that we've always constructed that our life, just like first century Jews, would have revolved around is drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
So when that temple comes crumbling down, what do we do? How do we face that change?
Yeah.
And
I'm
so many of us today with as current as this morning's news. Many of the things that we thought would always last are crumbling.
Yeah.
And we need to know that there is a bedrock underneath that we can stand upon. I'm sorry, Brian, I stepped on what you were about to say. Close
No,
us
that's
out here.
I will. First of all, Lance, I just want to say congratulations on your work. I think it's incredible how your life has been directed in this way, and that you've embraced it the way that you have. One of the practices of Quadratus, one of those 8 essential practices that we take with us, is to expand into risk. And as I've listened to you today, I've just seen the power of expanding into risk, because for you, even though standing where you are now, you go, this is how it's always meant to be. But the day that you were driven to the Men of Nehemiah, I'm just like, it's too early in the morning for me. Nehemiah, how when you drove that, it must have felt like a huge risk, and yet you stepped over that threshold and you embraced it. And so I'm taking that with me today. That just how brave and how powerful it is when we do expand into the risk. That's not really a risk, but it just feels like a risk in this, like this bag of bones that we live in, you know. So thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you for listening, Bron. Thank you so much.
Lance, go well. We'll see you soon, brother.
All right, I'll see you.